We have Kristi Jenkins joining me here today. You can learn what her team is up to by going to KristiJenkinsRealestate.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes, but really appreciate your time here, Kristi. We're going to be talking a little bit about everything because you're primarily a realtor broker, managing partner broker in your group. You typically work with real estate. When you do work with real estate investors, would you say is it fair? It's more high end properties on the coast?
Yeah, I mean that is a fair piece of my business, but I would say what I mostly focus on is helping my client purchase and sell real estate that kind of builds to their overall investment portfolio. So I've got several clients who have purchased first-time homes that then now have now turned into rentals and investment properties and helping them evaluate and analyze what's a good property that they're going to really enjoy living in. Because I think from a residential standpoint, you've got to balance out that subjective with the objective. You're not just looking at spreadsheets and numbers because this is not purely an investment. It is meant to be used primary residence or a vacation home and then turned into an investment property. I walk through those steps with my clients of figuring out how do you pick a property that you're going to love and want to be in, but that also has future long-term potential as a different type of property, a different type of wealth management resource for you in the way that you're going to use it, or potentially have several options for how they're going to use it in the future.
Do they typically come to you with this kind of plan in mind, or is this something that you've guided quite a few people to just thinking that far in advance as an
Yeah.
investment vehicle?
I think, Jack, I think after doing this for 21 years, I've noticed a huge difference in the younger generation population of people and what their strategy is heading into their first time purchase. I have several under 30 clients who, in the last couple of years, have purchased a property with a specific intention that this is going to be the first of several properties that they're going to buy and hang on to. And I think that's a very different discussion than the one I was having with clients even 10 years ago, where it was, how do I find my long-term property so that I can make an investment, build equity, then sell that property, use the equity, and move up. And I just think that it's been a really unique and interesting change in dynamic of how people are viewing resource and how the younger generation is seeing real estate as an investment and as something that they can grow and hang on to, and figuring out tips and tools and tricks in order to still maintain those homes and be able to purchase and move up when the timing is right.
This is particularly interesting because we have a tendency, especially that first time home buyer, we get attached to that place, and to turn it into a rental property more times than not has isn't usually a good idea just because of that attachment.
Yeah.
But having that conversation and making a that type of active decision ahead of time probably alleviates that issue.
Yeah, I think it at least opens their mind up to the fact that there are some options, that they may end up staying. Maybe this will end up turning into their 10-year home. Maybe they will have kids in it and find out that it really does feel like a family home instead of a starter home. But I think having that discussion ahead of time, and it's something that so many younger clients are coming to me with that perspective, having that discussion ahead of time really does give us some options of choices, and it removes a lot of that everything has to be perfect the first time, because like I said, they're not looking at this necessarily as their long-term home. They're looking at it as a stepping stone in order to get to the next step, but still balancing out that objective and subjective kind of feeling part that you were talking about, Jack, of making sure that, as they do turn it into a home and turn it into something that feels like a place that they can really fit into and grow their family in, that it doesn't become too much of an attachment, that they still can use it as an opportunity to do some different things with and structure it differently in the future.
Sure. Could you kind of spend a little time then talking about those features of the house that you would typically guide somebody to? Let's say they are going to buy this home, but it's just kind of a stepping stone. They might turn it into a rental. They might be looking to upgrade 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever it is. So
Definitely. I think in
what do
some
you
areas,
typically
yeah. Yeah, in some areas it's a little bit, less than that, especially in areas that are growing and there's new construction. happening. We're seeing the potential of taking those houses and selling them after 5 years and seeing a pretty good return on your investment and profit in those, especially if it's in a great school district and it's in kind of a family friendly community. Using that as a rental has been a really big deal. But I think one of the things I'm helping my clients look for the most is flexibility. Does it offer the opportunity to meet a number of different potential renters or buyers' needs? So if it's something that, maybe I will always steer my clients from fewer bedrooms to more bedrooms, even if they're smaller, because it can generally accommodate more people. A little bit of a yard as opposed to a big yard because it's just easier to manage. So there's different things that we're looking at in terms of the flexibility of the interior and the exterior space that really leverage themselves when you're thinking about what else could this be in the future. I'm helping one client closing on a townhome, new construction townhome in West Seattle. Great new construction build. And it was kind of at the top of his budget, but he knows what an up and coming and growing area that is. And so it offers him a lot of opportunities. Another client just closed on a property in North Bend, which is a suburb of Seattle, about 30 minutes east, really up and coming area, excellent schools, a growing downtown. But this was a property on some riverfront. And it just kind of offers that Northwest kind of idyllic lifestyle. Were 10 minutes from the mountains and the ski slopes there. And so, it's different for everybody, but we kind of figure in what is your long-term goal? How do we find you something that meets your short-term goals, but that also has some opportunities for long-term? And I think looking at it individually is really, really important. And that's why, after this many, I think I've helped one client purchase and sell 12 properties, most of them investment properties over the last 16 years. I think we've been working together. So really getting to know my clients and understand the evolution of their real estate journey is a huge and important part. And I think it's so much more beyond a transactional based career for me. And I think that's a huge part of it is being able to understand those trends, the evolution, how people's needs and their desires change and evolve over the years. So I count it a privilege to be able to do this with my clients. And I think my experience, my history are well matched for those kinds of clients.
Could you talk a little bit about any kind of updates and repairs that you would typically see, like any kind of situations where they can add some immediate value in
Yeah.
preparation for that sale or when they
Yeah.
move to the next thing?
I think neutralizing things is always the most important, whether you're going to be renting it or selling it, keeping everything as neutral as possible, even if you have customized things with unusual colors of paint or very specific hardware. I always have a home staged with really neutral furniture and items. I think that's really important for people to be able to see themselves whether or not they're going to be renting it, which obviously a lot of those finishes aren't nearly as important. But I live in an area where there's pretty high expectations. Even when you're renting, there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of product on the market for people to choose from. And so their expectations are pretty high. And so I think the recommendation is pretty consistent, whether you're going to sell it or rent it out. It just needs to look move and ready. And that means as neutral, as ready to go as possible. So if the carpets are in really bad shape, we replace the carpets. New coat of paint on the interior is almost always a given. And then if there's anything that needs to be updated or adjusted, light fixtures, things that are easy, we always tackle those first. And I've got just a huge list of contractors and vendors that I've got available to me. So it's usually pretty easy to get that done in a short period of time.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. We talk about that because I think some of us, whether we some will go through any kind of training material or, for fix and flipping or what have you. And then we also see, I think Zillow puts out a report on occasion of like color trends and a few
Yeah,
other things. But then we get locked into some of that stuff and then we don't deviate for years. And the next thing you know, the shiplap wall isn't as popular anymore.
exactly. I just was walking through a house with a client of mine up in Linwood in the north end of Seattle, and he's had it as a rental. He originally was a primary home for him about 20 years ago, and he purchased it brand new, but it's been a rental for the last 16 years. And so it's had some wear and tear and it's had some damage done and it looks its age and it certainly doesn't have the finishes or fixtures that would make the most sense. And when we did a market analysis, it was really obvious that the current condition and the current finishes were well under what he was hoping that he could sell that house for and move on to something different. And so we went through and we made a list and we weighed out the pros and the cons of either replacing the entire kitchen cabinets and countertops, or we went through each room, blue taped a few things that needed to be repaired, and then just really made a hard and fast list of what are the necessary repairs versus what are those that aren't really going to, lend you the best result financially in the end. But that also might, in a tough market, might help it sell faster too. So that's, we have to consider timing, market trends, and the timing of that as well when we're looking at what's worth it to update. And as a general contractor, my client has some opportunities and people available to him to do things at a certain cost that made more sense as well. So if this is it's an interesting project.
You keep referring to a variety of clients, building those relationships, establishing some of that background knowledge. It's obviously a skill of yours. Is there any tools or strategies there? Man, it doesn't come naturally to me. I need to be documenting everything and then reviewing my notes before I go see the next person.
Yeah.
So, what are you doing to manage that and keeping in front of all of this information?
That's a really interesting question. I think a lot of it is just up here. I think that's one of my strengths as a real estate agent is my long-term memory and the relationships that I've built with people. It's just kind of come naturally and their process and the evolution of what it is that they've needed. It's just kind of stuck with me. So I take pretty good notes on my clients. I have a lot in my phone so that when they call, stuff pops up, addresses, I can pull up where they're at, where their investment property is, where their second home is, and we can kind of go through things. But I feel like a lot of it is just stuff that I have kept in my internal files over the years.
Would you say is it fair to say it's part of your success?
Oh,
Building
absolutely.
such long, strong relationships, understanding where everybody is and in their journey and what they're doing and their strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why I feel like I'm your realtor for life because I do see this as a very long term career. And I've had a lot of success with it on varying degrees. My mom and I were partners for many years when we were working together. And so it was more of a family business that we curated together that I took over several years ago. And she has since retired. But it's something that we built from the ground up, wanting to do real estate differently, feeling like there was a lot of agents who are really transactionally focused. And for us, building this very organically from word of mouth, no marketing, that was before social media, any of that. I have stayed with that way of communication. I send out a monthly newsletter to all of my clients. I keep in really good touch. I drop by gift boxes and holiday gifts and send gifts to clients that have moved out of state. I just feel like that's a really important piece of my business because whether they've moved out of state or whether they're going to buy another piece of property, they ultimately know somebody who would benefit and who would connect well with me. And that's something that everybody at some point in their lives, at least in the area that I'm at, is looking to invest in and purchase in real estate. So being their go-to person, being that forefront person because you've got a history of taking really good care of them, anticipating their needs, dealing through difficult, problems when you've got the solution already planned out before you come to them with a problem. Those are some of the things that I think, my clients feel.
Mm. And it's those things that I think it's like you said, our society continues to push towards that transactional
Yeah.
world where it's just everybody kind of comes and goes. There's no memory of what previously occurred.
Yeah.
We've tried to be in the habit of like anytime we've been working with somebody, I'll just handwrite a note, a little thank you note, and mail it to
Yeah.
them right away. And nobody does that type of thing anymore. And it really stands out when you do it.
Yeah. It really does. And I'm a firm believer in that. I will sometimes send a video text message when I've just driven by somebody's house that they've left. And I'll say, hey, the new owners are taking great care of your yard. Look how great the grass looks. And especially when people have left a home that they really felt connected to know that the next person is taking really good care of it is really important. And I'll reach out to clients with that kind of update. And I think it helps keep them connected to the process. And the same for when people are moving into the area. I worked and lived and raised my own kids in the same neighborhood, in the same community that I still currently work. And so I feel like integrating people into the community, helping connect them with the schools and the amenities and the soccer clubs and the dance studios and all of that is also one of my superpowers because I know this community so well. So much of buying a house is it ends with that when that transaction ends. But your clients really want to feel connected to the community. And if I can help provide that in any way, I think that's something that I'm also really good at because they're going to feel connected to the community once they feel integrated into their community and the neighborhood surrounding them. So it's a really important part of my job.
Sure. Just remind everybody, KristiJenkinsRealEstate.com, KristiJenkinsRealEstate.com. There's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. So, Kristi, you've probably seen it all at this point when it comes to real estate investors and real estate in general. I'd be curious, what do you see as some of our blind spots when it comes to investors? Like we come into some of these properties and maybe our expectations or something are a little out of whack and you might have to re-educate us.
I've seen, one of the things that I've seen recently, Jack, is a lot of real estate investors, especially when they're doing flips, because that's obviously a lot of what I see on the residential side, are making decisions on their own without the advice of either a designer or somebody who is connected to what people are looking for today. So they're making choices on finishes and materials and products that are really outdated or that are just cheap. And I understand the bottom line of that. But when you have somebody involved who can help make sure that your costs are in line while still maximizing your profit in the end, because you're appealing to the widest group of buyers, I think it really does you a disservice to not get some advice on that. And that's why I've got a couple of both interior designers and stagers who can just come in and look at things and go, even from a consulting standpoint, you don't need a designer to help you through the entire process, but to come in and say, you know what, here's a vision board. And I've had so many vision boards. Here's materials. These all go together. This is the trim you should use. This is the paint you should use. Here's the countertops. And here's a sample. I think most investors, for as much as they like to see the numbers on paper, are visual. And if you can get a vision board that's got a combination of all the materials that you want to use and you know they all work together, that's going to benefit you so much more in the end than if you just kind of go about it blindly and do everything for either the lowest cost or without kind of thinking ahead of time of how it all goes together.
So you mentioned advising them around the neighborhood, maybe helping them getting involved in the local school and everything like that. Again, there seems like a lot of balls in the air regarding helping some of your clients. Do you have a large team or are you reliant on primarily yourself?
I have a team of four. So I've got two agents that I use occasionally for different reasons that also work on their own business. I've got a full-time executive assistant and I've got a full-time transaction coordinator. So I have help with a lot of and it took me a long time to hand off some of those responsibilities. But I think that part of the evolution of my career has been figuring out what I'm also the best at and what it is of my business that I can let go of and give off to somebody else. And training and hiring the right people, was something that I struggled with for a long time because finding that right fit, especially when you're a solo entrepreneur and a business owner and a little bit OCD firstborn child, handing some of that stuff off is tough. But I've found a really good team and a really good group. And I've also got such a huge variety of great contractors and vendors that I've worked with for years that I also know that I just have to make a quick phone call and I've got people that can help with just about anything that I need. So I feel like I've got a pretty dialed in team and I'm really fortunate for that.
And what happened to make you see that first hire as much of an investment versus it being an expense?
I think if I had to do it all over again, Jack, I would do it differently, but it got to a point where I just couldn't keep all the balls in the air. So it was out of necessity rather than out of planning. So if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have figured that in. But I think you just don't know how much value somebody is going to bring versus how much they're going to cost. And I was really hesitant to take that jump for a long time. But I knew that if I was going to grow my business, I had two kids that had finally gone off to college. My husband and I were empty nesters. I knew that if I wanted to take my business in a different direction, I couldn't just keep doing the things that I'd always done because I was just getting stressed out, working 60 plus hours a week, trying to manage everything. And so I think it was just out of necessity.
You mentioned it took a while to find the right people with the right
Yeah.
skills. What process did you go through to make sure you found those right individuals?
All of them were based on referrals from other people. So my transaction coordinator, she was doing a great job for other agents that I really trusted. My executive assistant, her company was being sourced out to agents over on the East Coast that were doing a fantastic job for them. So everything came, and the two agents I brought onto my team were ones that I had known for a really long time, and I knew the quality of their work. So everything, just like my business is referral based, everything that I kind of grew around me has also been referral based. And I think for me, that's been the only way to do it because I just can't imagine vetting, people from the ground up. Just like I would hope that most of my clients are coming from referrals as well, because those are the most trustworthy. That was another decision I made was the only thing I said about my business. I will still go anywhere. I will still travel if I need to for my clients, but I won't work with anyone who doesn't trust me. And that was the biggest decision. I had to be willing to say no to some clients because they either thought they knew better how to do it or they questioned every decision I wanted to make or kind of bucked every idea that I had. I think that's an important part of setting some ground rules too, is knowing what your value is, what you bring to the table, and being willing to turn business down if you can see the red flags popping up from stage one.
Well, it's kind of cool that we kind of started off in that relationship world, and now we're kind of closing this part of the
Yeah.
episode out because it sounds like it in the end it's all about relationships. That is
Yeah.
the recurring theme here.
Absolutely. Yep. For me, it is. And it's relationships with other brokers too. In the end, it's a small world that we work in, and you're likely to run into the same agents, the same brokers in this kind of small community. And so, doing a really good job on each transaction from a professional standpoint, too, is another just important part of building those relationships and making sure I've won contracts because the other agent knows of the quality of work that I do and that I'm going to follow through and that they're not going to have to do the work of two people. And I've won contracts because my reputation for doing a really good job and being really professional. So it flows all throughout the business side of this, from the relationship with your clients to the relationships that you have with other professionals in the industry.
It's kind of interesting how you always run into the group of people, as I would imagine you're in the same situation, where they're in constant competition. But in the real estate world, it's the one area that I worked in where, for the most part, everybody is kind of like willing to help where they can and knowing that eventually what comes around goes around. I mean, it's always more times than
Yeah.
not a good scenario.
Yeah. I think that that is a changing dynamic in our field. I think that I very much used to feel when I first started in this business, even for the first 15 years, I felt like, if I shared an idea, it was going to be taken. If somebody shared an idea with me, it was very close to the cuss. And, I learned, I think the hard way, and this was by trial and error of talking to brokers in other areas and other states and finding out what they were doing and collaborating on a different level. I think I've found how much more of a collaborative job this could be than it was when I first started in this business. So I think that it's changing. And I think that if we want to continue kind of down this path, then it's going to have to change for the better so that we do support each other, encourage each other, look out for the best in each other. I'm working on a tough transaction right now where the other broker forged documents, has been sneaky. I mean, you name it. We have gone through the ringer on this one. We're currently delayed in closing right now because it's a new construction. We don't have a okay to occupy or occupancy permit right now, and they tried to pull one over on us. So you still run into those
Mm.
agents, and this was a unique scenario. In 21 years, I've never had anything like this happen, but where agents are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and doing their own thing and hoping not to get caught. Most agents really do want to participate and help and collaborate because we all have the same goal, get the buyers to the sellers and the sellers to the buyers and close that transaction successfully and smoothly.
Sure. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Christy.
No, I just think the only other thing that I was thinking when I had listened to a number of your shows was how differently people look at their real estate investment now than they did when they purchased homes 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's an evolution, working with people who are retiring, who, their sole retirement has been in their home and the equity that they've built in that. And they don't have this concept of multiple properties. I think it's just been an interesting shift in the dynamic of how people are thinking about real estate investing, and something that, again, I was thinking about several of my clients when I listened to a number of your shows, of how that dynamic has changed so much over the years.
Yeah, and we could spend some time because I'd even be curious as to what you think is the future, like in the
Yeah.
near term, because everything seems to be in such upheaval at the moment. It could either be great or it could be even a bit more depressed. So we'll see what happens. But I'd be curious as to what you would think, and maybe I don't know if you have a minute to talk about that, or if we should save that for another episode.
Yeah, I think that as more younger people are coming into the market and seeing real estate and real estate investing differently, I think we're going to see a shift. And I also think that a lot of cities, just like Seattle is with our House Bill 1110, seeing more middle housing, seeing more development, seeing an increase in the different types of homes and communities that we're building. I think that there is definitely a desire to provide for a wider opportunity for people to invest in real estate than there ever has been in the past. There's a much, much bigger concern, at least in the greater Seattle area, for making sure that we have housing affordability for everyone. So I think that you're going to continue to see people investing in real estate and seeing that as a wealth management opportunity instead of a singular focus. I think it's going to be seen as more of a broad stroke.
Well, if you are ready, Christy, we'll jump
Yeah,
into the rapid fire questions.
sure.
Again, it is Kristi Jenkins Realestate.com. Kristi Jenkins Realestate.com for more information there. Well, Christy, first one is, since you've been especially working with so many real estate investors, what lie do investors sometimes tell themselves?
I think they tell themselves that the emotional piece doesn't matter. People look for housing objectively, but they buy subjectively. And I truly believe that. If you're looking at it with too narrow of a lens, you're taking out a big portion of why people are going to purchase that property.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh, don't care so much what other people think. Cliche, but it definitely took me a long time to learn.
Do you have a book recommendation, or what are you reading right now?
Oh, I just finished reading for the second time Unreasonable Hospitality. I started in the hospitality industry and restaurant management, and I think the idea of that and how you take care of clients and the kind of hospitality that you provide in a customer service related way is perfectly encapsulated in the book Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's definitely a driving force behind this.
What single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
Oh, treating AI like one of my employees. I think I was really hesitant to use ChatGPT and AI until I understood how to maximize it for its benefit. And now, if it someday it replaces me, at least I will use it to the best of its ability while it did. But it took a little while, but I have trained my system to really act and speak in a voice that resembles mine, to put out process and marketing materials and ideas in a way that reflect me and my business specifically. And even though that took a little while, it's been way worth it.
Well, Christy, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you joining me here today. Great to meet you.
Thanks, Jack. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.